Hello again, this is Pastor Tim coming to you from Bend and Lomita United Methodist Churches in Central Texas. We've been doing a podcast on the Bible. I figure that there's really a lack of knowledge about the Bible in understanding the basic stories. And once we don't remember the stories, the faith, the foundation of the faith is knocked out. So we really need to learn the stories, and they need to be made in such a way that you can have a way of getting into it and understanding what it's all about. We've been doing Moses and the Hebrew people coming out of slavery in Egypt and their 40 years in the wilderness. And now they're getting ready to enter the Holy Land, the land promised by God. Because they didn't believe God, didn't trust God, to take the Holy Land in the first few months that they were out and about, that God says you're going to wait 40 years. So they spent 40 years in the wilderness. Now they've spent that time up, and most of the people that were alive at the time when they denied, didn't trust God to give them that place are gone. We have a few people left that including Joshua, who was the one of the spies who said to trust God. He's going to end up being the leader. Moses now has spent some 40 years as a prince of Egypt, 40 years as a shepherd for his father-in-law, and now 40 years for leading the Hebrew people out of slavery. 120 years is a pretty long life. Of course, I think they counted things a little differently in biblical times, the way that people give it 700-800 years. That there's no evidence of that. They must have counted differently. They didn't have the same calendar that we do. So Moses has reached the end of his life. Some suggest that he's done something wrong, that when he struck the rock, when God gave him water in the wilderness, that he struck it twice, and that disobedience of God to God caused God to say, "You will not be the leader in Egypt." In Israel, in the Promised Land. I don't really see that as the reason. I think that the reason was that they needed a different kind of leadership to settle the land. You need one kind of leadership to lead people out into a journey in the wilderness, but there's an entirely different leadership that you're going to need to go in and occupy the land. The land was already occupied. This was not vacant territory they were entering, and they had to figure out how to take over that land. So they needed a different leadership than Moses. So it said that Moses got to go up and see the Promised Land, but he would never lead the people into it. That leadership was passed on to Joshua. And Moses then got a promotion. He went to be with God. And so that was a well done, good and faithful servant. He has done all that's required. He's learned to take care of his temper. He's lost his royal persona when he was a prince of Egypt, and now he's ready to be with God. He's done what God has asked him to do, and in fact, at times argued with God and won the case. And God remained faithful to the Hebrew people when God was ready to give up. So Moses has done his job, and now Joshua is going to be the new leader. And one of the first things he does is that he takes the Ark of the Covenant across the Jordan, just like Moses crossed the Red Sea or the Reed Sea, probably more likely. And then now he's going to cross the Jordan into the Holy Land to take over. So the leadership is passed on to a new generation. I think that God always passes on leadership to a new generation. The church was quite different when I entered into. It was mostly male clergy. It was very organized. It was institutional. And that changed over the last 50 years. Um, Now it's much less dominant in society. People don't listen to what the preacher has to say or what the institution has to say nearly as much. They don't pay attention. They don't keep things off the schedule on Sunday morning and Wednesday night. The church is in a different position. The church needs a different kind of leadership, and you don't need to do church the way you've always done it. Church has changed over the years, and you need new leadership. So that the new leadership comes, God calls him into being. And so he calls Joshua. Joshua goes into the promised land, and you would wonder how they're not trained soldiers. How did they conquer the Holy Land? One scholar said that in the land that was the promised land that God was giving to the Hebrews, one thing is that God did it, and that's understandable. The other part is that there were more slaves than there were free people. So that means that somebody would be coming up on a village, and there would be two or three slaves for every landholder, for every free person that was in charge. And the slaves would see that as an opportunity to switch sides and to maybe get free. And so that's one of the things that happened, is that the people that were in the Holy Land already didn't have control of it. They had too many slaves. And so that's one of the reasons why the Hebrews were able to settle in. They settled in the land and gave land to the 12 tribes, actually to the 11 tribes. The 11 tribes at the time received their lands and began to exist in tribal kind of leadership. The 12th tribe was the Levites, who were the ones who led worship, and they received a portion of the income, a portion of the produce from the rest of the tribe, so that they could continue to exist and be free to worship God and to read the scriptures and be able to share. And so the 12 tribes settled in, but it's not going to be all roses. They separated into the tribal groups, but they didn't have any cohesiveness, any togetherness, and they would be vulnerable to the invasion of other nations. They knew that, so they knew something different was going to happen. So next time we're going to talk about how they picked a king. So I'll see you next time.